Hello, friends. Hello and welcome. Welcome to yours and mine Cozy Corner. My name is Amanda, and on this channel, we talk about books, and more books. So, friends, today we are going to do my April reading wrap up. And I will tell you, with this reading wrap up, I did not read that many books this month. Let me see, I read 5 books, and out of the 5 books, I only had one 5-star read. And let me go on my little rant just for a second here. So it is now May, and I feel like I have not been having the best reading months. I'm not in a slump. I'm still excited about reading these different books, and I'm having a good time with some of them, but I'm not getting very many 5 stars. And I believe that I am a generous rater of books, so I probably give higher ratings than maybe other people do on some of these books here. But thus far, I want to say, and let me see, I have my journal here. Like usually I take notes, but I'm just going to look out of my journal because it was just so much easier. So for January, I had one 5-star read, one for February, none for March, and April, only one. And that in itself is not bad because I did have like some 4-star reads and some threes, but most of the books I would say would have just been kind of average. I've enjoyed them, but just not like it was for 2024 where I was just getting like bangers after bangers. And I guess that's just how it is sometimes. You're just not going to, you know, um, always have successful reading months. And again, the books wasn't bad that I read this month. I just feel like overall, thus far for 2026, I'm not getting kind of what I want. But anywho, with that out the way, like I said, for April, I read 5 books. And so the first one that I read was Tell Me Something Good by Court Stevens. This is a mystery suspense thriller. It was published in 2025, and it's 384 pages. Now, with this, the book wasn't bad. It wasn't anything really wrong with the book. It was just okay. And I think for me, I was a little disappointed with this book because the synopsis was absolutely fabulous. When I read, as a matter of fact, this is a book that I got from the Goodwill. When I read the synopsis for this book, I was like, I'm not even putting that on my shelf. I'm going to read this book like immediately. So I was really excited by the synopsis. And then it turned out it was just okay. It just wasn't, you know, great. And I think I had maybe just set my expectation for this book really high. Now, I believe, and I should have read my notes before I started recording, but I want to say, and I could be completely wrong, but I want to say with this author, this is her first debut, like with an adult fiction. I think she normally writes YA. I don't know if that played a role at all because I have never read any of her other books, so I have nothing to compare it to. But like I said, it was a good book. I just think my expectation for this was really kind of high. And the ending, I put on here that I didn't really care for the ending. There were certain parts that I was like, okay, yeah, I do agree with that. But overall, I felt like I had invested so much time into reading this book that I feel like the ending wasn't the payoff that I wanted it to be. But, it happens. It is what it is. Okay, guys. So as I said a few minutes ago, I'm reading from out of my journal. I usually just, have my notes, but I'm reading directly from my journal. And I think it's important that I read this because I think I made a good point that I want to give across, which is, the synopsis was so good that I was expecting something, I don't know what, and it didn't deliver. And I'm not certain why that was the case, because it had everything in it that made for a great story. It's like making soup with all of the correct ingredients, but maybe the measurements was off. However, I feel that this is a book that many people would enjoy reading. It just wasn't for me. The only two negative things I would say is that at some point it did become a little convoluted with the amount of people being introduced. Now, that's something that I really don't like in books. When there's like 50,000 people being introduced, it's like, are they really important? Do I really need to know who they are? If not, please don't add 100 different people to the plot. And like I said earlier, I also did not care for the ending. But outside of that, I believe that the plot was good and the writing was, it just didn't do it for me. But I do believe a good amount of people probably would enjoy this book, just not myself. Okay, guys, so the next book that I read is actually the only 5-star read that I had for April. And this is one of the books that I tried to do a reading vlog on it, but it just did not turn out well whatsoever. It was a bit of a mess. So I never put that out. But this book is one of the books, and you guys have heard me say this before. I don't usually like to read books that are like, that just came out, that are really hyped, because my expectation, is up here. And if it doesn't meet it, I'm so disappointed, even though I know I shouldn't do that. But that's what I do. But this one right here, I absolutely love this book. And I feel that the hype is 1000% correct with this one. And that is Daggermouth. Daggermouth by H.M. Wolf. This is a romantasy and a dystopian world with enemies to lover trope. It was published December the 5th, 2025. And this is a pretty long book here. This is 559 pages. Now, typically, I don't read romanticises, and I don't, go for books that are 500 plus pages. But this right here, well worth it. So again, I'm going to read from out of my journal, just so I can tell you guys what my, thoughts were at that time. So I have here, this is a 5-star read for me. I would recommend this book to any and everyone, regardless of the genre that they read. I believe this book has a little something for everyone. I enjoy really getting to know the characters, even the one I hated, Maximus Sorel. He is one of the evilest villains I have ever encountered in a book. The rest of the characters, for the most part, I really did enjoy, even though I cannot necessarily relate to them. But as I've stated before, I don't need to like or have anything in common with the characters to be able to appreciate the book. And that rings true for this particular book. The book was long, 559 pages, but so easy to read. Truthfully, I didn't even pay attention to the pages once I started reading. I was so invested into the story that the page count didn't matter. I never once felt like, oh my God, when is it going to end? And that's honestly true. If anything, every day I was like in a hurry to read. Well, when I say in a hurry, I didn't rush myself. I took my time with this book, but every day I wanted to read, because you guys know how it is. Some days you're just like, I don't feel like picking up a book today to read it. But this one, every day I was picking this up to read pages. Even if all I could read was 10 pages, 10 pages was going to be read. So, and I wrote this. Let me just read the journal and stop going off the cuff here. But I'm glad that I was in no rush to read the book and that it wasn't on audio. I believe reading it physically allowed me to take in every part of the book. Sometimes with audio, I can miss some key points, and I don't always rewind to see what I've missed. Now, I know I ain't the only person that do that, but yeah, if I'm listening to a book, and, sometimes, you come back and you're like, how in the world did we get here? And you do have to rewind it. But sometimes I'm like, I ain't rewinding. We just going to keep on going and, hope for the best. But this one right here, I read the physical book, and I'm just really glad that I did that, because it forced me to go slower, to take my time. And I wanted to take my time because I know with fantasy books, the world building can be a little tricky. And I just wanted to make certain that, okay, let me make certain that I take my time and do this and understand the world that they're building here. And again, I'm going off the cuff when I don't need to because that's what I wrote next. So I said, also, I'm glad I took notes. I took notes thinking that the world building could be complex, so I wanted to be ready. However, the world building was simple, but I believe my notes will be a great form of review since book 2 doesn't come out until 2027. Now, I didn't know at the time when I grabbed this book that it was going to, have a sequel to it, because if I had known that, I probably would have waited. I'm one of those people, I do like to read like series back to back, unless it's something that is just emotionally too much and I need to pause. Now, the only negative thing I have to say about this book is that if there wasn't a second book coming, I would have hated the ending. But I have to keep in mind that if that were the case, then maybe the author would have written a different ending. So basically, I have no issue with this book at all. I believe the author will, or I hope, answer all of my questions in the next book concerning the ending. I cannot see how she wouldn't. Great job, and the hype is real. I really, really, really enjoyed Daggermouth. Okay, guys. The next book that I read was Judge Stone by Miss Viola Davis and James Patterson. This is a mystery suspense thriller. It came out March the 9th, 2026, and it's 432 pages. Now, let me say this again. I'm just going to read from the journal because I feel like if I go off the cuff that it's not going to come out the way that I want it to. So this was a good book. Okay. I would definitely recommend this book. However, I can't lie, I was slightly disappointed. Now, my disappointment is my own fault only. In my head, I had hyped this book up because it was co-written by the great Viola Davis. No one else hyped this book up. It's just me because I love me some Miss Viola Davis. I love her as an actress. And because of this, if she plays in a movie I don't like, it's okay because I can still guarantee that her acting is superb. That's just who she is. She's most definitely one of the GOATs. Okay. With that thought process, I applied the same thing to this book. And yes, the book itself was really good. Great plot, great characters. However, it wasn't anything mind blowing. Okay. The fact that it was set in the South and it was, according to the synopsis, to be the most controversial case in the history of the South, I was expecting a lot more. I honestly could have guessed the majority of the plot, and that too was fine. But I just thought it would be more twists and turns, and just simply put, I wanted more. I created that in my head, and I just felt a little bit disappointed by that. Now, I also was slightly disappointed with the audio. Initially, I had planned on reading the physical book, but someone said the audio was great because it was narrated by Miss Davis. So I had to listen to it. And yes, it was good, but again, it wasn't anything mind blowing. I think I would have felt exactly the same if I would have just read the physical book. The only thing that I could say that I did not like about the book was the judge constantly walking around the courtroom. Y'all, I don't know if y'all have ever been to court, but judges do not walk around as much as this judge did in this book, and she really was kind of getting on my nerves with that. Um, I enjoyed the ending and was met with a few surprises I didn't see coming, but overall, like I said, overall the book was good. And I did enjoy it. I do recommend it. I just personally hyped it up too much in my own head, and that's my fault. The book that I read was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This is a historical fictional novel that involved mystery and fantasy. It was published March 2021 and it's 301 pages. Now, overall, I thought this book was good. It had a good plot. I enjoyed the characters. It was really easy to keep up with the two different timelines. So I'm one of those people who I actually like multiple timelines. I just don't like being confused between the multiple timelines. But with this one, it was really easy to keep up with, mostly because the timeline differed by 2 centuries. And the fact that the stories were so different, it made it easy as well. So I don't feel like there's any way you could have confused the timelines in here. I also enjoyed the fact that there were strong female bonds made throughout the book and that someone wanted to right the wrong in real time. I am one of those people who be screaming at a movie or in the book, oh, they did that, get them back, get them back. You know, sometimes people are like, you just got to wait for it. They get it in time. No, get them now. And so I did appreciate that about this book. And even though I would recommend this book, I'm not going to lie, this is not a book that I wish to read again. So it's not a book that I'm going to keep on my bookshelf. And I am working really hard to shop my bookshelf because it's getting out of control. So I'm not putting myself on a book ban because I'm not going to do that. That's not going to happen. But I can't control myself enough by not going around books for the most part. I believe I can, and just shop here so that I can, make room when it is time to get more books. But anyway, again, I don't went off on a tangent. But like I said, I don't plan to read again, so I am going to get rid of it. But I do think it was, it was a good read. Now, this is the first book that I read from this author, but because I thought her writing was good, I do hope to read something else from this author. Okay. All right, guys. And the last book that I read for April is Acquired Taste by Clay Chapman. This is a book of short story collection, horror stories. And guys, I really enjoyed this book. I don't remember the last time that I read like a short story collection. If I had to guess, I would say maybe as a teenager, but I can't even say. But this I really enjoyed. And I felt like some of these stories was like micro short stories. Like I was like, this is just like, 2 pages here. I mean, it was just really short, but I enjoyed all of them. Of course, there were some I enjoyed more than others, but I cannot recall one of the stories that I thought, it was just okay. I thought all of the stories in here were good. And it just amazes me how the author can pack such a punch with just, such few words. But yeah. Anyway, I believe that the author does have several standalone books, which is great. And like I said, I do want to read it. And he's so descriptive that he kind of puts me in the mind of Nick Cutter, who also writes horror. And, sometimes the way Nick Cutter describes stuff, you're just like, that's kind of creeping me out a little bit. And I think this gentleman here, Mr. Chapman, did pretty much the same thing. So I definitely look forward to reading his, other books. And some of the stories were downright scary if you truly think about them happening in real life. Like as an adult, I think it's very hard to read a book and just be like, oh, I'm scared. But I think when you start to think about it, and you're like, oh, if that happened, if I were in that situation, in that sense, it can be so uncomfortable that it's like, oh, that is a scary thought. And I think he nailed it with that. And I also like the fact that the author touched on real life issues of this century, such as like one of the ones he did with the right wing news channel. I thought, oh, that's really interesting, So this is a book that I would recommend to whoever like horror, especially for those who enjoy really quick reads. Okay, guys, so that's it. That is the 5 books that I read for April. Like I said, it wasn't a lot of books for this month, which I'm completely fine with. I haven't done a TBR video. I didn't do one in March. I didn't do one in April. And I didn't do one for May. Um, I might do one for June. It just, we'll kind of see what happens. But usually I'll try to come up with at least 10 books if I'm doing a TBR list, just so that I will have some wiggle room in there. To be honest, if I only read 2 books, I'll be okay with that too, because I don't want to just read books just for the sake of reading it. I want something that I can enjoy, something that I want to talk about. So, there's absolutely not a minimum number that I have to read per month. Like I said, when I do the TBR list or the video, that's just kind of putting enough out there so that I will have some wiggle room. So anyway, if you guys have stuck around, which I hope you did, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I will talk with you guys later. Bye.